I'm going to get started. All right. Good evening. Welcome to the May 4th, 2022 meeting of the Revere Conservation Commission. For those that would like to, let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll do roll call. Robert Cassidy is not present. Heather Legier.
Here.
Ann Raponi.
Present.
John Shoes present. Joe LaValle.
Here.
Brian Averback.
Here.
Nicholas Rudolph.
Here.
All right. So next is approval of the meeting minutes from April 6th. If there are no additions or corrections, can I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, they're approved. So first up on the agenda is a notice of intent for a construction of a single building, two-family home on 50 Broad Sound. DEP has not yet issued a file number. So who's representing? I'm going to go ahead and open the hearing on that.
I make a motion to open it.
I'll second.
In favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. For the record, Rick Salvo with Engineering Alliance. Here this evening on behalf of Anthony Zizzo, who's the owner and applicant of the subject property at 50 Broad Sound Ave. It's known as Tax Map 2, Block 63, Lot 4A. It's comprised of almost 11,000 square feet, 10,824 square feet to be exact. The resource area is present on site is land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is indicated here in this blue line. There's a little piece over here, and then the front portion of the property. As we discussed at the site visit last Saturday, although this site's in the floodplain, it's barely into the floodplain. It's into the floodplain by about 8 inches to a foot. So the proposal will be to raise the grade directly adjacent to the dwelling from about elevation 5.5 up to about elevation 7. So we can remove that area from the floodplain, take this dwelling out of the floodplain, construct the dwelling, install 2 trees as was required by the Site Plan Review Committee, install a new cement concrete sidewalk along the frontage of the property, which was also required by the Site Plan Review. We're also proposing 2 500-gallon dry wells at the rear of the property to mitigate the flow from the roof. This roof will generate about 250 cubic feet of water. Each dry well is about a little over 221 cubic feet, so we have almost double the capacity as would be required in an effort just to try to mitigate that runoff in those smaller storm events. Obviously, in the 100-year storm event, in theory, the area around the dwelling would be inundated. But in the smaller, everyday storms, this would mitigate the rate of runoff leaving the site to result in a net decrease rate of runoff. These small driveway and walkway areas relative to the size of the dwelling are small enough that we would result in a net decrease in the rate of stormwater runoff leaving the property. I see the DEP hasn't issued a file number. Doesn't look like there's issued file numbers in a while. So hopefully that will be forthcoming shortly. But I guess with that, I'll turn it back to the Commission for any questions or comments that you have.
So I didn't see the abutters list in the package.
Yes. The reason why you didn't see the abutters list in the package is because it took the system was down but I have the abutter notification forms right here.
And then,
It was down at the time we submitted, but they got us the abutters in time to be able to notify. As we discussed at the site visit, the majority of the abutters are relatives of the applicant, so.
yep. And then just for our records, if you have a copy of the site plan review letter, if you could forward that to the commission, I'll just include it in the file.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. I'll have to get my hands on it. We didn't do that, but we'll be able to happy to get that for you.
And then, before I open it up to the public, does anyone on the commission have any questions?
Yes. So I just had a few questions. How long do you think construction will last for the property to be all set?
Yes, around 8, 9 months?
Okay. And during construction, because on Broad Sound, parking is pretty limited, will the majority, if not all, the vehicles be on that property, or are they going to be on Broad Sound?
I would imagine to be on the property and behind the property on the other land that the applicant owns.
Okay, just because I know up until October 1st, you got to have a parking permit, so that would be hard to do. But if it is going to lapse over, it's just very important that once October 1st hits and you don't need it, if it is possible to have the vehicles be on your property because you have a lot of land to park, it just helps the neighbors in Broad Sound, you know, being able to have a place to park their cars.
Yeah, we don't see that to be an issue.
And same with, is there going to be a dumpster on site for a long period of time?
There'll be dumpsters on site probably for the majority of construction.
Okay. All right, but they won't be near the road, or are they going to be further back?
They'll be up close to the dwelling,
Okay.
you know, for easy access, probably snug right up to it.
All right, thank you.
Did you have any questions, Ann?
I did. I didn't hear the number of parking spaces, or did I miss something?
Nope, so there's a garage in this part of the house that would host 2 parking spaces, and then there's a driveway, there's a small apartment in the back that would house 2 parking spaces.
So the total number is,
We're proposing 4 parking spaces. There's probably enough parking there for, I would say, 8,
total?
yeah.
Just curious. Thank you.
I can't recall if we discussed this at the meeting on Saturday, but what kind of, is that going to be asphalt pavement for a driveway?
Yes.
Okay. I know we've talked previously about using that soluble type asphalt or brick in the past. I don't know if that's a rule or not, but a suggestion, something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we could do, I mean, obviously, there's no requirement for meeting pre- and post-rates of runoff for a single-family house, nor is there a requirement in land subject to coastal storm flowage. That's why we put the driveways in still, to mitigate that, to do sort of the responsible thing here. What we would be willing to do, if the commission felt strongly about it, would be to put a stone drip edge along the edge of the driveway to help mitigate that rate of runoff. Probably would prefer to do that rather than the pervious asphalt. With the prices of materials nowadays, it would just start to get to be cost prohibitive.
Thank you.
So you can update the drawings showing that?
We'd be happy to.
Okay.
And I just want to add one thing to my fellow commissioners, that I live near the property. I just want to say that what they're doing is going to help increase the value of the properties nearby. It's going to take something that is empty and make it look really nice. And I feel that this is going to be a benefit to all the neighbors in the neighborhood. So as someone that is going to be impacted by what they're doing and having to see it every day as I have to drive by it to get anywhere, I do feel that this is going to be a benefit to the neighborhood that Broad Sound has.
Any other questions from the
Thank you
commission?
for sharing that.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Anyone else want to speak in favor of the project? Anyone?
I have no questions.
Okay. Anyone opposed to the project who would like to speak? Okay, so with the owner's and your permission, we're going to have to continue this until the next commission meeting? because we don't have a DEP file number
No,
and,
understood. Yeah, it is what it is.
yeah. So as soon as we get that, then we'll let you guys know and we'll come back for the next meeting.
Okay,
Great.
very good.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Next up is a request for certificate of compliance, DEP file number 061-0738, 1133 North Shore Road.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Members of the commission, for the record, Rick Salvo with Engineering Alliance. I here this evening on behalf of North Shore Condos LLC. John Nakajian, who is the manager of the LLC and was the general contractor for this project, is here this evening. We did have a site visit, submitted an as-built plan, and a certification that the plan was built in substantial compliance with the approved plans. We did also submit the elevation certificate as you requested, as well as the signage alerting the folks in the garage that they are parked in a floodplain, and in the event of a 100-year flood that they need to evacuate the garage. So those signs were placed. There's two separate entrances to the garage, one off of Calumet and one off of Beachland Ave. So there were two signs placed, and one on each end of the garage.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure that that satisfied all the conditions, at least prior discussion at the site visit. So if there's any other questions, comments, we'd be happy to entertain them.
All right, I don't see any questions. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the certificate of compliance.
I'll make a motion
I'll
to
second.
that effect.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Great, thank you.
it's done. And if you wait a little bit, we'll get you the certificate after the meeting. Okay, next up. It's a notice of intent for dewatering to support Phase 1-R at 220 Revere Beach Parkway. So this is the Suffolk Down site. You state your name and.
Sure.
Okay,
Mike,
address.
Michael Borowski, 15 Sullivan Street in Charlestown. So good to be here. My name is Mike Borowski with the H1 Investment Group. We've been here many times before the commission. I know there's some new members here. We've been here, of course, before for master plan related items and design items. Now we're ready to start construction, some site construction and vertical construction on the site. So we're here tonight to talk through some of those items. As a result of the depth of the foundations of some of our site elements and buildings, and also the groundwater levels, we're going to need to start a dewatering operation. So I'm here tonight with Liz Clark and Bill Gibbons from Bielsondamas and Vertex to talk through that in a little bit more detail. So I can turn it over to Liz. She can walk through the details.
Hi, I'm Liz Clark from Bielsondamas. I'm a registered professional engineer for the project, and we are excited to be going forward with our first building. So we are going down about 2 stories, and we will be hitting some groundwater during this excavation. So as a conservative measure, we are coming before the commission to file this notice of intent to enable discharge into the intermittent stream located behind the parcel. So over here. This is our secondary discharge location. We do have 2 locations on site that we will be discharging water to in the first instance, and if we run out of storage in that area, we will be going to the wetland area. So this work is also subject to the remediation general permit issued by the EPA, and we'll be going through Mass DEP for the surface water discharge permit review as well. And with that, I would like to open it up for questions.
So,
And just for the record as well, I'd like to submit our green cards in receipt of a butter notification
the butter
as well.
notification, great, thank you. So during the walk down, I think you addressed some questions. We're not going to be able to vote on this tonight again because we don't have a DEP file number, but as I was thinking forward, what would the conditions be that we would put in an order? Because there's really not perpetual conditions, there's,
Can I respond to that?
you may.
Okay, so I've been going in detail through the existing orders we have, getting ready for the development of R9 and R10. And in that, we have the conditions to have an environmental monitor who is responsible for overseeing and reviewing all of the erosion and sediment controls on the site. I think that that condition should definitely hold true in this case as well. So adding the dewatering into the scope of the environmental monitor's review. Noting as well that the erosion and sediment controls that are proposed in the plans, and this is again mimicking the conditions we have in R9 and R10, are the minimum. So in the event that we are seeing scour in that area, that would need to be addressed and remedied. Additionally, we could be open to, in the event that we do need to shut down dewatering, also notifying the commission.
So, and again, we're just talking out loud here.
Yeah.
And then we'll get comments, although no one showed up. And I haven't gotten any input from any of the commissioners yet. So one of the things I wrote in here was, upon completion of all work regulated by this order, the applicant shall submit with its request for certificate of compliance a summary report for each dewatering location detailing all the releases, testing, any deviations from permit limits, chemicals used, and their safety data sheets, manifest for any material, sediment, soil, precipitate chemicals disposed off-site, and a signed stamped statement in writing by a professional engineer stating that the dewatering was conducted in accordance with the conditions of the order. I think it's just kind of captures everything in one final report when you.
Yeah, we would agree to that.
Okay. Do you guys have any comments?
Just a question, I didn't think of asking this at the site, but is there any possibility that this water could ever be, under certain conditions, brackish? If I'm not mistaken, there was an area, where the apartments are across the street, across the parkway? That used to be a marsh area back there. Matter of fact, there was a hut where they used to clean clams and stuff in many, many years ago. And I never thought about that until just now when we were discussing it.
And can I just add to Joe's question, just for the benefit of our constituents out there that are watching this? Many people don't know what's involved in the dewatering process. So I'm wondering if you could just explain it a little bit so the people watching this would understand.
So when we start excavation, we're gonna drive sheeting because we're going down so deep, to make it safe and that we're not just open cutting a vast area. And as the contractor's doing that and getting further and further down, we're expecting to hit the groundwater. Once we get to the bottom of that excavation, they are going to implement water protection issues so that we can limit what we are doing for dewatering. But in terms of treatment and monitoring, I'm going to turn it over to Bill to respond to that.
Hi, I'm Bill Gibbons from the Vertex Companies, and we're preparing the notice of intent for submittal to the US EPA and to the Massachusetts DEP, requesting authorization to discharge under the EPA's dewatering and remediation general permit that'll be coming out shortly. The dewatering process, as Liz has alluded to, it involves, we have a large hole in the ground, there's going to be water collecting in that hole, there'll be pumps installed into that hole at various locations. That water will go to typically initially a fractionation tank. It may go to 2 or 3 fractionation tanks, and the flow will be separated between them. From there, it could go to additional treatment if additional treatment is necessary. When the EPA issues their authorization to discharge, they will set certain discharge limits for a variety of parameters. The parameters would include things like total suspended solids, pH, They might include parameters for metals and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons and other things. The compliance with those discharge limits has to be monitored in accordance with the permit. The monitoring has to be done at the first day that you're doing the pumping and discharging, has to be done again one more time that week, typically on day 3 or 4. Then it has to be done weekly for the first month, and then it has to be done monthly thereafter for the duration. We're monitoring both the water coming into the treatment, and the treatment, again, would include at a minimum settlement of solids, because this water, you're pumping it out of a big excavation, it's gonna be a little muddy. And then we're testing the effluent coming out of any treatment to make sure that we're meeting all the discharge requirements.
When I was there, I was under the impression that a lot of this water was going to a theater area too, right?
Yes, so that's one of our primary locations where we'll be discharging. So we are going to target R3 and then also the surface, the amphitheater basin for primary discharge or first line of defense. And then the second line, if we exceed the capacity of those areas, will go to the wetlands. So those are here and here. And we spend a lot of time standing about here, right there. So it was the group I was with, and the other guys walked this way along the site. So this is where the amphitheater is. We'll utilize our natural excavations. We have our natural depressions on site for our first, sorry, it's confining. So we'll utilize our natural depressions on site for our first areas of discharge. And then in the event that we do get an excess of water, we'll be going to the wetland. Or I should say the intermittent stream.
Joe, I didn't mean to jump on your question, but I have one more question. This is limiting, so you're trying to keep the water, as much water as you can on site and manage it from there. So we don't expect for any of that water to be displaced on neighboring, through, in
Not at
neighboring
all.
homes.
Not at all. So
Okay.
our site, we're very fortunate that we do drain into ourselves and we don't discharge to neighboring or abutting properties. So from, this wetland or the intermittent stream, it does connect into the Sales Creek and then out into the ocean essentially.
So does the EPA regulations determine a percentage that can be, it can go into the creek?
The EPA does regulate the maximum amount of discharge, so that would be the 694 gallons per minute is the maximum we're allowed to discharge, or the maximum rate.
And by then it's already been cleaned from your site, basically?
Correct.
It should be natural
Yep,
flowing. Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Just have a couple clarifying questions. Do you have a date that's set now for when you actually begin?
We started driving sheeting Monday. So R10 is beginning. We anticipate to be about mid-excavation, so halfway down, I think mid-June, and they're completing thereafter. So we wouldn't be utilizing this discharge at the earliest until late June, early July.
And you mentioned prior when you were speaking about an environmental person that you're working with on another aspect that you want to kind of tie into everything else. Would they become a point person for us at all?
Oh, the environmental monitor. They
Yes.
are a point person for you as well, and I sent around the contact information for that person. So that is Jack Duran from JMA. So JMA is the general contractor on site. Jack wasn't there at the site meeting, but you did meet his overseer, Joe Chirillo.
And if hypothetically, and I don't foresee this, but if there was something that you did find that was very serious as you're digging, how would the commission find out about that? Would it be through that person, through you directly? I just want to know what the next step would be if something happened.
What do you mean by serious?
Let's say something happened when you dig up into the ground, maybe it's different than what you were expecting, because you never know when you're digging up. Would we be informed of that through whom?
We're not expecting any surprises. We've done a lot of testing out there. We've completed, I want to say something like 30 borings throughout that one parcel itself, all the way down to the bottom of the excavation. We've looked at the soils, we've looked at the level of the groundwater. There've been geotechnical borings and environmental borings, so.
I'm just saying in worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario, so from our perspective, something that would kind of rise to that level would be something that would be considered a reportable condition to the Massachusetts DEP. And the Massachusetts DEP, under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan regulations, has established a number of things that would be considered a reportable condition. For example, and we're not expecting this, we haven't seen
Sure.
any sign of this at all, but for example, if we were digging and suddenly we saw a big slug of oil, right, big petroleum contamination or something like that, if it's greater than a half an inch floating on the water table, you have to report it to the DEP within 72 hours. If it's less than a half an inch but more than an eighth of an inch, you have to report it to the DEP within 120 days. So there's a whole variety of different reporting thresholds. So that would be something that, if we were to find something like that, there are also public notification requirements. Typically, on the municipal level, the public notifications, in accordance with the regulations in the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, go to the chief municipal officer, to the mayor, and to the Board of Health. So that's probably how the city would find out about it.
And my last question is, when do you believe R9 and R10 will be complete?
So R9 will be complete in the summer of 2024.
Okay.
R10 will be complete, base building would be complete in the first quarter of 2024, with tenants moving in thereafter. So really occupancy being, first occupants really getting in there and being complete by summer of 2024 also.
All right. Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you for your patience. So in terms of brackishness, so we have tested in the Boston portion of the site, the existing horseshoe pond for brackish conditions, and we didn't find any. We did that during our master planning as an evaluation to see if we could utilize that pond for irrigation. Just hydrogeologically speaking, and also just from study of historic photos, that pond appears to be groundwater fed. It has never, the level doesn't appear to drop. So it would, I don't believe we'll be finding any sort of brackish water in the groundwater. You think about groundwater, that's usually fed from your overland conditions. So it's not something we're expecting. Yeah.
And the excavation itself is going to be surrounded by sheet piles, and at the bottom of the excavation, there'll be a concrete mat. So that's going to limit inflow into the excavation itself. So the dewatering really is to excavate, is to dry up that area of the excavation. In the process of doing that, before the mat is installed, water might come up underneath the sheet piles from the middle of the excavation. But once we reach that depth and put that mat in, we wouldn't be expecting to be pumping much water at all at that point. So brackish conditions can sometimes occur when you're drawing water, you're pumping for a long time and you're drawing water in from the closer to the ocean, and that can sometimes occur. But in this case, we would not be expecting that.
Which brings about another hypothetical situation. If, let's say the possibility of a 78, blizzard of 78 event when there's overtopping at Elliott Circle. Would that affect the cement at all? I know salt water does. I know, maybe it's kind of a reach here, but it's just a funny scenario that I see there.
Yeah, I think, the cement would be poured in the dry, so that the excavation would be dry. It would be allowed to cure, and I believe after it was cured, it would not affect any kind of overland flow from a blizzard of 78 sort of.
So while that cement is setting, you have to have a dry situation anyhow, is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Yeah.
I'm not a concrete guy, but yeah. My knowledge is limited in that area.
You know, that's one of the things I told you, I wasn't that familiar with this kind of a foundation. I said that at the site. And I referred to the fact that, you know, a lot of these other buildings have used pilings and not the spread foundation with the cement pads and everything. So I just tried to get more information and wondering what the effects would be in various locations. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nick?
So as we were walking the backside of the property where the creek is located, as we got to, I can't remember the name of the street that's in between the site and, I can't remember what it's called, but anyways, so the creek that's back there was awfully close to the residents. Now, what if we're in a situation where we get 30 days of rain in June, where you guys are excavating, drawing in water from your own excavation plus the added water of the environment? What kind of notification system do you have in place if the residents need to be notified if you had a extreme runoff?
Okay, yeah, so I'm gonna go over there just to orient you a little bit. Can I?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, guys. Okay, so the creek you were seeing that's awfully close to the residence, that's over here. So when we were standing in this location, it was a bit more visible. The discharge location is actually closer to this area. We had targeted an area that's a little bit flatter than that high ballast you were kind of up on. So this flows this way. Yeah, no, understandable, and I know exactly, you were looking likely up here closer to the residence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as I was on the site, you really, because of the way you've built it up and it was just the way it was pitched, I couldn't really tell which way the
Yeah.
creek was pitched, but
I
thank
made
you.
one of the guys stay with me, just so I made sure I understood where I was. It's, yeah, there's a lot going on out there. So we are away from the residents. Behind this is all, again, wetland and actually owned by the proponent here. So we don't anticipate having a significant discharge that would impact them. They are also much higher. So this wetland is down, I believe, around elevation 9, Boston City base. The average grade of Washburn Ave, as well as the site prior to us raising it, is at elevation 15.
Okay, all right, that's pretty significant. All right,
Yeah.
I just wanted to be
Yeah.
absolutely sure.
So I have just a couple follow-ups. Have you done any testing at that depth of the water?
Yes, we have. We tested, and we're required to test the water at the location of withdrawal for the notice of intent. And the testing for that is a little bit different than typical environmental testing, but it's a lot of the same parameters.
Yep.
And we didn't identify any issues in that groundwater.
And then are you going to be installing well points down below the surface to pull the water out before it percolates to the bottom of your hole?
I don't know exactly how the dewatering will be conducted. Sometimes it's done with well points, sometimes it's done with driven sumps, if you will, as they advance the sumps as they excavate down.
Okay.
It's usually an effort to minimize the amount of kind of turbid water, muddy water that might be coming into the pump.
Right.
So sometimes these sumps might be surrounded by some small gravel and things like that too.
And then I know we discussed this last week, but just since we're on TV, what are the discharge limit parameters? What are the things is it turbidity, pH, is it?
Yes, typically, they have not been set yet. They would be set in the authorization to discharge issued by the Mass DEP and the US EPA. Typically, they do include things like total suspended solids, pH, metals, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. There might be a petroleum analysis that's required in there, might be some biological oxygen demand, might be ammonia. It's really going to be up to them as to what they want.
All right, but that'll be all part of that general permit.
They'll all be part of the general permit, which the EPA has just issued in draft form April 26th. So there's not a final permit under which they can authorize the discharge yet, but that permit comment period closes May 26th, and the EPA has indicated that they expect not to receive a lot of comments and that they will be able to issue that permit relatively quickly.
Okay. Any other questions from the commissioners? All right. Anything else you want to bring up or mention? Anyone from the audience?
You close make a motion to close the hearing?
So we can't close the hearing?
Yes.
We can't, because we don't have a file number. So we're gonna have to continue the hearing to the next commission meeting. So
Okay.
I'll need just, as long as we have your permission to continue the meeting, we can keep it open until the next meeting. So, all right. I think that's good for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
One second here. If you give that to. All right. So next on the agenda is enforcement action updates. I guess 80 Union Street. Just to update you folks and then get Nick to do a summary. We received a complaint. The DEP received an anonymous complaint about potential dumping into the marsh area near 80 Union Street. So I contacted the owner of the property, he contacted the business that was running it, and Nick volunteered to go to the site and take a look.
Thank you, John. When I visited the site, there were indeed very large piles of soil collected on the property. It was observed as we walked through the site that the perimeter of the property, there was no disturbance of the marsh area. The marsh was actually encroaching on their property. Bob, being the general manager, walked me around, and he has a processing plant on the site, and he's been slowly but surely getting rid of the tailings off the property. There were some existing piles on the property. You could tell because there were overgrowth in the vegetation. You could tell it had been there for a little while. But he also had a very large pallet of EnviroSuck, which is a catch, basically, to stop silt going into the marshes. And he said that he'd be putting that in place until such time that the piles can be removed. And we agreed on a 2-month or so with getting rid of the piles by May 31st. So we'll be following up with him after that.
Okay. I think I sent everyone pictures, and so everyone should be up to date on that. 8 and 10 Marshview Terrace. So for 80 Union, we issued a potential notice of violation. It's a little bit more friendly. But for 8 and 10 Marshview, we actually issued an enforcement order because they had dumped a bunch of rubble in the back and had covered over some wetlands. It's an area critical of environmental concern. They have responded very well. They met our timeline. And again, I've just so this recorded in the minutes, they've done all the plantings that were required, and they had their wetland scientists come up and do a final inspection. And I sent that letter to you. So right now, what we'll do is I'm going out, and I think Nick said he's going to be there, and Joe. We're going to go visit on Saturday. And then as a result of that visit, we will issue an amended enforcement order. So everything is fine, and they've been very cooperative, but we'll need to monitor that for the next.
This will be the final step,
No,
if everything's in order.
no.
No?
This will be an amended enforcement order. They're gonna have to take pictures every 6 months for the next 2 years to make sure that the wetlands that were damaged returns and flourishes. So this thing will go on for the next 2 years. But it's good right now.
It's the best way to go.
Yeah,
It's the only way to go.
yeah.
We have no choice.
All right. Next up, just really quick, these things kind of come out of the blue, and there's always a very short turnaround required where different departments in the city ask for letters of support for funding and grants for different projects that support preserving our natural resources, improving, our stormwater infrastructure, resiliency, climate change, that type of thing. So I just wanted to, if you guys are okay, I've been responding to those on behalf of the commission, which kind of implies you guys are aware and would approve of this. It's kind of administrative. It doesn't really warrant an open meeting or hearing, but
Communication is what it's all about.
yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for taking care of that.
Okay. All right. And then the rest of this on 7, the correspondence, and I'll just go through it real quick and we can close the meeting. So Bielsondamas, who was here, we had our pre-construction meeting for building R-9 at Suffolk Downs. That was last week. We just talked about the anonymous complaint about the potential filling. And there is an upcoming pre-application meeting with MIPA for Gibson Park on May 10th at 3 p.m. It's a Zoom meeting, so if you want to attend, let me know. It's by Zoom. It'll be lots of other agencies on there, but yeah, it's at 3 p.m. So again, I don't know if you're familiar with the Gibson Park project, but they're going to improve the shoreline there, underground tanks for stormwater storage and release, more recreation. It's a really large project, so.
Is that gonna be recorded, do you know?
Is it what?
Going to be recorded, the meeting?
It should be.
I
don't
assume
know.
because it's on Zoom, right?
Yeah, should be.
It's too bad they hold these during working hours.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, and I think I forwarded that to everyone. If you guys see things like that and you want to join, just let me know. Site visits, of course, we had the 3 site visits last week, Suffolk Downs, 50 Broad Sound, and 1133 North Shore Road. That was it. That sums it up. I don't think we have any other business. Motion to adjourn?
First.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.
Too late.